Good evening. History is often written in decades, but sometimes it changes in a single hour. At 2 o'clock a.m. local time yesterday, January 3rd, 2026, the silence over Caracas was shattered. For months, we watched the build-up, the warships in the Caribbean, the warnings from Washington, the strikes on drug vessels, but no one truly expected what came next. Operation Absolute Resolve was not just a series of airstrikes. It was a surgical decapitation of a regime. Within 30 minutes, more than 150 U.S. aircraft neutralized Venezuela's air defenses. In a daring raid, Delta Force operators entered the presidential compound at Fuerte Tiuna by dawn. Maduro and his wife, Cilia Flores, were no longer in Venezuela. They were on a U.S. warship, the USS Iwo Jima, bound for a federal courthouse in New York. As President Trump famously posted yesterday, we turned off the lights, and for the first time in over 20 years, the Cavista grip on power was physically broken. Why now? The White House argues this wasn't an act of war, but a law enforcement action on a global scale. Attorney General Pam Bondi has laid out a staggering indictment: narco-terrorism, cocaine trafficking, and the arming of gangs like Tren de Aragua, which the U.S. officially designated as a foreign terrorist organization just last year. President Trump has framed this as a modern evolution of the Monroe Doctrine, or as he calls it, the Donroe Doctrine. The message is clear: American dominance in the Western Hemisphere is no longer a suggestion. It is a mandate. The administration's argument is that if a leader uses the machinery of a state to flood American streets with fentanyl and violence, that leader forfeits their sovereignty. But this has opened a Pandora's box of legal questions. Is it legal to kidnap a sitting head of state? Critics, including Senator Mike Lee and Representative Jim Himes, are already clashing. One side calls it a brilliant operation for justice. The other calls it a crime of aggression that ignores the UN Charter. While Maduro sits in a detention center in Brooklyn awaiting his Monday court appearance, a massive power vacuum has opened in Caracas. Vice President Delcy has claimed the presidency, calling the raid a kidnapping and an imperialist assault. She has ordered the military to form an indestructible wall of resistance. However, the internal situation is chaotic. We've seen conflicting reports. Secretary of State Marco Rubio suggests that is privately cooperating to ensure a transition, while her public rhetoric remains defiant. Meanwhile, the Nobel Peace Prize laureate Corina Machado, once the face of the opposition, seems to have been sidelined by Washington's new strategy. The president was blunt: "We are going to run the country until there is a safe transition." This implies a temporary U.S. military or civil administration, a move we haven't seen in this hemisphere since the 1989 invasion of Panama. Then there is the black gold. Venezuela sits on the largest oil reserves in the world, and the U.S. intends to use them. The plan involves sending U.S. energy giants to repair a crumbling infrastructure that has been neglected for decades. President Trump has stated that this operation will cost the American taxpayer nothing because it will be reimbursed by Venezuelan oil revenue. This is a radical shift in foreign policy. It isn't just regime change, it's a total economic restructuring. For the average Venezuelan, this could mean an end to hyperinflation and the return of fuel to the pumps. But for the international community, it looks like a resource grab that could set a dangerous precedent for future conflicts. The world is reacting with shock. China has strongly condemned the use of force, seeing its billions in investments at risk. Russia, Maduro's longtime protector, is currently bogged down in its own conflicts, but has called for an emergency on Security Council meeting. In Latin America, the reaction is split. Colombia is bracing for a massive influx of refugees as the situation destabilizes. Cuba has called it state terrorism. Yet in Doral and Miami, the streets are filled with celebrations from the Venezuelan diaspora who have waited 2 decades for this moment. We are seeing a world divided between those who prioritize the rule of law and those who prioritize the removal of dictators. As we look at the footage of smoke rising from La Carlota Airport, we have to ask, what comes next? Capturing a dictator is the easy part. Running a country of 28 million people, deeply divided and impoverished, is the hard part. Is this the beginning of a new era of American interventionism? Or is it a necessary strike against a regime that had become a threat to the entire hemisphere? One thing is certain: January 3rd, 2026 will be remembered as the day the Donroe Doctrine became a reality. The lights are back on in some parts of Caracas tonight, but the future of Venezuela has never been more uncertain. Stay tuned as we follow Maduro's first court appearance in New York tomorrow. The trial of the century is about to begin.